Okay, let's get started. So today we're going to be doing some very, very practical stuff. Things you can hopefully use in your lessons straight away, today even. As you can probably tell from the title of the masterclass, we're going to look at podcasts and how you can use them in your lessons. And I want to look at podcasts in a few different ways. First of all, we're going to look at 3 great ESL-specific podcasts and some easy to prepare exercises you can use with them. Then we're going to branch out a little bit and look at some exercises we can do with ESL podcasts more generally. And after that, we're going to head to the more advanced area of things and see how we can use non-ESL-specific podcasts to improve our students' listening skills and improve genre-specific vocabulary. Finally, we'll then get out of the classroom a bit, and I'll give you some recommendations for other ESL podcasts that students can just get into in their own time. Okay, let's get rolling. Okay, so the first podcast I want to look at today is the L.O.S. Idiomania podcast from Language Online Services. I really like this podcast in particular because of the clean, friendly and easy-flowing dialogue between the two presenters. On one side, you have Martin, a Czech English teacher and entrepreneur with a voice a bit like caramel. And on the other, you've got Rory, a bright, enthusiastic British English teacher who has a talent for explaining the idioms that appear in the podcast. The format is simple. Martin and Rory discussing a single theme like animals or happiness or procrastination. The themes are random, pretty random, and exploring the idioms around that theme. Each episode is very short, so you can get a bite-sized dose of idioms without breaking the time bank. This is something you can just use in your lessons. It would take up half an hour max, even shorter, if you can do it that way. But of course, just listening isn't enough really to improve our learners' English. So let's get our students engaging with the content. Okay, so with this one, with the L.O.S. Idiomania podcast, there are lots of idioms right from the beginning of each episode. So even before we get to the content, we have language in context. So here's what we do with this one. First of all, use the introduction. The introduction, as I mentioned, is rich with podcasts. Get the students to listen to the intro and try to note down any idioms they hear. Maybe you want to listen twice as well. Listen back and get the students to figure out what it means in context. And this is good for group work as well, of course, because people are going to pick up different idioms. So let's have a listen and see if you can get the hang of that. Let's try this exercise ourselves.
This show improves your spoken English in leaps and bounds. I'm Martin, the presenter of Idiomania and the founder of L.O.S. Language Online Services. As always, I'm joined by my English friend Rory, who is going to help me explain today's expressions. Welcome back, Rory.
Hi, Martin. Hello, listeners.
Let's cut to the chase and introduce today's topic. Today's episode is called Foreign Exchange. Listeners, have you got any idea why we chose this title? If not, maybe Rory could shed some light on today's topic. Why foreign exchange, Rory?
Well, we're using it as a pun, but literally it has 2 applications. One is financial, the second is educational. So in financial terms, foreign exchange relates to the changing of money from one currency to another. So when I change my English pounds into euro, when I go to France, that's foreign exchange. Educationally, it refers to when students swap countries. So a load of students will go from England to Italy to study, and a lot of students will travel in the opposite direction from Italy to England to study. So that's also foreign exchange. As I say, we're using it as a pun. The thing is, English gets a bad press with lots of countries because so many English words have crept into their language, especially French. It drives the French bananas. They hate it. But anyway, this actually cuts both ways. And there are loads, dozens and dozens and dozens of words from other countries that have crept into English. And we're going to highlight some of those in today's episode.
That's right.
Right, exercise 2. You can also turn the episode into a game. So you would listen to an example sentence, because they give example sentences in each of the idioms before they explain it. Then you can pause the audio and students guess the meaning of the idiom from the context. Little context, but maybe enough to get the idiom. And then, see who was right, give points, make it a game. Teams win, teams lose, the tragedy of the hero's journey. Okay, so that's quite simple and quite good fun. Finally, this is quite a good format for students to kind of make their own. It's really simple. Get students to research their own idioms or remember idioms that you've taught them during the course and get them to make their own episode in the same format as the L.O.S. Idiomania one. And you might even want to send the recordings to Martin and Rory. I'm sure they'll listen to them and I'm sure they'll appreciate it and they might give you feedback. So, getting things out into the real world is a great way of motivating our students. Okay, so next podcast. Right, this is a Happy English podcast, and they don't call it the Happy English podcast for nothing. Michael, the man behind the podcast, keeps everything upbeat, going through vocabulary and grammar points so smoothly, you'll just want to keep listening. The podcasts are each quite short, usually between 5 or 10 minutes, and they cover many different language points, such as idioms with foot, or how to use way, or using any and all in the negative. Some are really, really specific, and he's got loads and loads and loads and loads. Since this podcast focuses a lot on how to use particular words, whether they're very lexical, like way, or quite grammatical, like any and all, this is a good opportunity to turn this into a word spot exercise and for a teach, test, teach sort of setup. Quite a classic setup, but been known to be quite effective still. So for this example, I'm going to use the episode on the word tough. So the exercise I got in mind here is quite simple. In fact, let's do it all together now. Okay, so first of all, let's put the word tough up on the board or on your virtual board or however you're teaching these days. You can even make it a hangman or sort of reverse hangman. Check out reverse hangman if students are really fed up with hangman. Anyway, you've got the word tough up there. Okay, next, brainstorm different ways how to use it. People can think of example sentences, different things that this word tough can mean. And then listen and check, listen back, see how many they got right. So let's listen now and see what Michael from Happy English Podcast has to say.
We can use tough to mean difficult. You can have a tough exam, a tough assignment at work, or a tough situation in life. Here are some examples. The TEFL exam is tough. It's one of the most difficult English exams out there. I'm really tired today because I was working on a number of tough projects at my office. I feel bad for Tony. He's having a tough time with his teenage boys. We also use tough to talk about people. A tough person is a strict or stern person. For example, my boss is a tough man to work with. He is very demanding and not flexible at all. My parents were tough with my sister and I when we were growing up. I didn't like it at the time, but looking back, I'm glad that they were so tough. The police in that small town are very tough. So when you drive there, you need to make sure that you drive carefully and stay within the speed limit. We also use tough to talk about a dangerous neighborhood or a dangerous group of people. For example, Howard grew up in a tough neighborhood. Even today, there are a lot of people there who sell drugs right in broad daylight. Tony's son started hanging out with a group of tough guys in his school, and now he's often getting in trouble. We can also use tough to talk about a material that is strong and not easily broken. For example, the dashboard of my car is made of a very tough plastic. They use very tough material to make those backpacks, which is why they last quite a long time. And finally, we can use tough to talk about food that is difficult to chew or difficult to cut. Here are some examples. Those peaches aren't ripe yet. I tried one last night and it was very tough. I cooked steak yesterday. The flavor was okay, but the meat itself was very tough. By the way, when we talk about food, the opposite of tough is tender. For example, I like that steakhouse because they only use dry-aged beef, which is always tender.
Okay, next, put the feedback on the board. So, Michael was talking about tough meaning difficult, tough meaning strict, tough meaning difficult to chew, strong material, dangerous. Get this stuff up on the board, elicited from your students. And then a follow-up activity to sort of cement this. I would suggest bringing this into the real world as much as possible. So a good simple follow-up activity that doesn't really require much planning is really just getting students to make questions for each other using the target vocabulary. And this, just a good way to cement their knowledge. Okay, really simple, but sometimes the simpler stuff is the best stuff. And remember, this is also a listening exercise. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. A simple, direct exercise is all we need, sometimes, at least in this case. All right, okay, moving on to the next podcast. Easy stories in English. Now, one of the most relaxing ways to listen to English and pick up new vocabulary is with stories. They can be engaging and fun. Ariel Goodbody's Easy Stories in English starts off with new words and phrases at the beginning of the episode. Then you get a story. It's very simple. They pre-teach the vocabulary and then you get a story. There's a good mix of easy, medium, and advanced levels. Intermediate. Easy, intermediate, and advanced levels here. So you can find what's best for your students and what's best for your class. I'm recommending this podcast simply because it really lends itself to classic listening comprehension. Again, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of this is very simple and straightforward. It's a way of improving students' vocabulary too, but it's largely a way of getting the students to absorb themselves in a story. The story is what makes it engaging, and that gives more impact into the learning. So, first of all, you can give the vocabulary from the podcast episode to the students. Maybe you want to get them to divide the vocabulary into know and don't know. It's a very good thing to do in groups because it encourages peer-to-peer teaching, students teaching each other when they know something. That's very valuable. Okay, and then you listen to the vocab input session at the beginning of the episode. You can discuss the meaning of the don't knows with the students can discuss the meanings of the don't knows with each other. Or you could even just make it a matching exercise. You have the vocabulary, the students match the definitions. However you want to do it. The important thing is that they're engaging with the vocabulary. Okay, so let's listen to that and see how that sounds.
Okay, I'll just explain some words that are in today's story. A fairy, F-A-I-R-Y, is a small magic person. Fairies have wings and can fly around, and fairies can do magic. The tooth fairy is an idea in many countries. When children's teeth fall out, they put them under their pillow. In the night, the tooth fairy comes and takes the child's tooth, and she puts money there. Of course, the tooth fairy isn't real. Actually, the parents come in the night and put the money there. In some countries, like Spain, the tooth fairy is a rat called Perez. In Korea and Japan, people throw teeth on the roof. When you fall over, F-A-L-L-O-V-E-R, you fall onto the ground. It can hurt a lot to fall over. Children fall over a lot and then they cry. When children are about 5 years old, their teeth start to fall out. A coin, C-O-I-N, is a small round metal piece of money. There is paper money and there are coins. In some countries, like America, coins are not used very much. Coins are used a lot in the UK. Some people collect coins from around the world. When someone is sleeping, they are asleep. A-S-L-E-E-P. When you are asleep, you often dream. When you take something away and put something where it was, you replace it with something. R-E-P-L-A-C-E. For example, parents take their child's tooth from under their pillow and replace it with a coin. Then they tell them that the tooth fairy did it. If your bicycle breaks, you will have to replace it with a new one. When you don't agree with someone, you don't think the same as them, you disagree. D-I-S-A-G-R-E-E. Brothers and sisters often disagree on things. If you are friends with someone, you shouldn't disagree about things, but it can happen.
Okay, great. So they've done that. Then give the students a gist task. So this is important. Make it about how the students feel. We want top-down skills here. Don't make the gist task like a language comprehension one. Give the students the opportunity to make it about themselves. So you can ask the students how they feel about something, or what they think would happen after the story finishes, or something like that, something that gives them their own ideas. Finally, you can have a discussion about the story and the gist task. Remember, the gist task is open and helps the students talk about their feelings and their thoughts. So you can turn this into a larger conversation. And try not to focus on the language of this task, I think. Focus on the meaning and how it relates to the learners. This can be a lot more engaging than simply, how many boxes were outside the house. This stuff is boring and it's too technical. Yeah, let the students open up with this one. Okay. Now let's move on. Let's talk. I want to go through some basic exercises that you can use with more or less any podcasts, any ESL podcasts. The only thing you really want to make sure is that the podcasts are at level, that you're giving advanced stuff to advanced learners and beginners stuff to beginners learners. I want to recommend a few podcasts that work for these exercises, which I'm about to give you. I've basically chosen these ones because they're quite easy to follow and they're aimed at language learners. They're ESL podcasts. I'd say these would probably all work generally for the pre-int to upper intermediate and even advanced range. So this sort of area, most of the area, most of the levels that we tend to teach. Okay, so what are they? Well, these podcasts are English Club. These guys cover a vast range of topics, from a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus to Lamborghini started as a tractor factory, and my personal favourite, sarcasm means to tear flesh. So yeah, again, nice variety of interesting topics. The episodes are very short, which can be useful if you don't have much time. Adept English. These ones are a little longer, so you have more text to play around with. This podcast has very slow English, so you might even be able to use it with some pretty low-level students. And it's also quite up-to-date with the topics it discusses, things like FOMO, fear of missing out, and the Me Too movement. It's very contemporary feel to it. Conversations with Kate. You'll be surprised that Conversations with Kate features lots of conversations with someone called Kate. Her approach is very simple. She talks to a different person each episode and finds out what makes that person interesting, what motivates them, what makes them tick. So these episodes are actually very down to earth and have a sort of reflective, meditative feel to them. The episodes are quite long though, so you might want to take some excerpts depending on the exercise, or just, stagger it over a course of lessons. Finally, better at English. So if Adept English was slow, this one is naturally paced. So yeah, you might want to use this one for exercises that focus on listening skills themselves, and for higher levels in general. And again, the episodes are on the longer side. Okay, good. That's all very good. But how can we exploit these wonderful resources in the classroom? Good question. Well, one of the obvious approaches you can take is one of the more traditional ones. Today, I'm going for a lot of traditional procedures here because they do really lend themselves to listening exercises. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So yes, you have this huge mountain of audio text, right? Audio copy. And for some of them, you have written text too, because they provide the transcripts. So turn these into classic listening exercises. Use these to improve our learners' listening skills. So what do I mean by classic listening exercise? Well, this would include top-down skills, thinking about the content and the themes of the text. What does it mean to the students? What do they think about it? What do they feel about it? How does it relate to them? Real world meta thinking, and also bottom up skills too. Like, what does this word mean? Why did she use this tense in this sentence? The technical and the nitty gritty. If you focus on both of these, you get a much more holistic sort of result in the students' learning. So let's have a look and see how this might all come together. So for this example, I'm going to use English Club's episode on Black Friday and Buy Nothing Day. So what do? Well, first of all, start with some warmer questions to get the students into the topic. These are the top-down skills immediately applied. So you might ask them whether they've heard of Black Friday or even Buy Nothing Day. Talk about sales, or for fun, you might even want to show them a clip of the carnage of Black Friday and ask them what's going on in the clip. A clip like this. Right, so that's quite an emotive video, right? So that's a good way of getting things rolling. People are probably quite familiar with it too. So yes, then give the students the gist task or a gist task and then listen. So you might ask them something very broad, like name 2 things that happened on Buy Nothing Day, or what do you think about Buy Nothing Day versus Black Friday? Give them it's a gist task, something general, right? Okay, so let's listen to the clip and think about the gist task.
Black Friday is also Buy Nothing Day. Black Friday takes place the day after American Thanksgiving at the end of November. It is one of the busiest shopping days of the year, and many retailers offer special deals for consumers who are starting their holiday shopping. In recent years, many people have noticed that consumerism has taken over the holidays and taken a toll on our earth. Some have decided to boycott Black Friday by calling it Buy Nothing Day. This international day of protest against consumerism gains a little momentum each year. Some activists stand in shopping lineups and offer to cut up credit cards for those who are about to waste money on things they don't need. Others stay out of the malls and try to convince friends and family members to do the same.
Okay, so 2 things that happen on Buy Nothing Day. Well, an answer could be cutting credit cards and convincing family members to stay at home, for example. Okay, so that was that. Then go for the bottom-up skills. The nice thing about English Club in particular is that they have key vocabulary on the episode page, which is great. You can use this immediately in your classroom. One thing you can do here is either get the students to discuss the key vocabulary, put them into the know or don't know, and then you listen to the episode and figure out the don't knows from the context, or even, like I mentioned before, get them to match definitions and the words. Okay, yeah, and finally, you can move back to the top-down skills and engage in a conversation with the students. You can prepare questions about Buy Nothing Day. Do you like the idea? Would you get into Buy Nothing Day? What things can you do to promote it? Or if you want, you could just go full task-based learning and get the students to design a pamphlet for Buy Nothing Day, or even try out some of the actions themselves, go out into the real world, offer to cut people's credit cards, and report back to the class and make the task about what they did during Buy Nothing Day. Taking things out of the classroom into the real world is always valuable. Right, moving on. Using non-ESL podcasts. Okay, so we're going to look at 2 main elements you can use non-ESL content to focus on. Okay, so it's going to be chunking and messy real-world features. But let's talk about chunking first. Okay, so when I was learning Turkish, I would sometimes go way above my level and delve into texts that were basically not meant for learners. It was very difficult to stay afloat most of the time, but I really got a lot out of it. Reading and listening, then rereading and re-listening many, many times until I'd sucked out everything I could from the text. So the best thing about doing this was that I would walk away from these sessions with some very impressive phrases and collocations. And I think that's the key here. So-called real-life texts are an incredibly wealthy resource when it comes to chunks of language. If you caught my previous masterclass on lexical learning, you'll remember that one of the best ways to learn both grammatically oriented items and vocabulary oriented items is through chunks. Big bits of language, like I wanted to know whether he blah 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 or not, or that's a grammatically oriented item, or that's putting it mildly, that's a vocabulary oriented item. So once you've found the podcast episode that you want to use, bring up the topic to your students, talk about it, ask questions, get the interest brewing. Again, this is the sort of warmer, right? And it's introducing students to the topic. So if you're going to listen to a podcast episode where 2 people talk about, I don't know, sailing, for example, you might ask, do you sail? What do you know about sailing? Any famous sailing stories? Where would you sail to if you had the time? Classic conversation stuff. Bring it out of the students. And then students do research. Okay, so this is the thing, right? Once you've talked a little bit about the topic, if you get your students to research the phrases related to sailing, we get this sort of extra lexis. And, so vocabulary and lexis, a lot of it clusters into different topics. And this is why podcasts are quite good, because there are podcasts about everything. So we can improve learners' I think sailing vocabulary or shopping vocabulary or political warfare vocabulary or whatever it is that they might want to learn and might want to look at. So get them to research the topic, get them to find vocabulary around the topic, like words and phrases related to sailing, and then they present the new vocabulary to the class. And then listen and check. So you're listening to a podcast episode about sailing. Play the sailing podcast episode. Get the students to see if any of their words and phrases come up. They probably will. Lexis sort of revolves around topics a lot and genres, and it's usually quite a closed, limited sort of range of things. So hopefully that will be very satisfying for them, because they would have checked stuff online and then they would have heard it in action immediately. And then also get them to listen again and pick up new phrases, things that they've missed in their research. And another real benefit you can get from listening to real life English is that our students can get exposed to all the things that make listening so damn hard in the first place. Things like different accents. So many English teachers from England sound like me, posh and southern. American and Australian and South African English teachers tend not to have broad accents, and English teachers tend to have a pleasantly neutral tone. And international English teachers, second language English teachers, we're all quite easy to understand, basically. It's part of our jobs. So by drawing on material that's designed for so-called native speakers, our students can hear people from New York, Texas, Uganda, and Kashmir, working class people, people who are eccentric, people who are angry. There's much more range of accents. Another barrier to understanding English out there in the real world, of course, is the fact that as teachers, we automatically grade our English. We're good at it. English teachers are, in my opinion, some of the best communicators on the planet. But that's not going to help with our students when they spend 2 weeks in somewhere like Glasgow. So you'll get all this ungraded language and the different accents too. Also, back channeling and negotiation strategies, false starts, self-repair. With a lot of ESL podcasts, the script is tight and there isn't much natural speaking going on. That's because, as I mentioned, English teachers focus so much on making things clear. But most speaking contains things like back channeling. When you say things like, or, yeah, go on. These little signals. Self-repair, when you make a mistake and then you say something like, oh, sorry, I meant blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, not dot, dog. Self-repair strategies. And also false starts, when you say something like, it wasn't that the car, I couldn't get the car to start. This happens a lot in language. These messy elements of communication are something we need our students to get good at. So let's talk about different accents. The first one. Okay, so this is all about awareness raising. This isn't an exercise in particular, or particularly an exercise. It's about getting the students to be aware of and then start getting used to different accents. If you're listening to a podcast with a variety of accents, perhaps you could ask the students if they can tell where the speakers are from. See if they can match people to the parts of the world. Talk about which ones are easier and which ones are more difficult and why. Make this a very open conversation. Remember, this is general awareness raising. It isn't really task oriented. If you want to follow up with this, you can always exploit the awesome YouTube channel Korean Billy. This guy is great. He's basically a genius at English or British English British dialects. In his videos, he breaks down an accent and gives key vocabulary. Basically, it's that straightforward. This can open the discussion even further, and you can really see how the accents are different in different parts of the world. When it comes to things like back channeling, repairing, and full starts, try doing something like this. Okay, so write the phrases on the board, first of all, back channeling, repairing, full starts, and tell the students that you're going to demonstrate each of these things, and ask them to decide which one it is, so they match the term to what you're doing. Back channeling, by the way, would be very funny for the students, because no one's actually speaking and you're just going, yes. So that's good fun. So let the students match the phrases to the negotiation strategies, and then discuss it. It's important that they realize these elements of language exist. All too often, learners have this weird sort of perfect idealized native speaker model in their heads, which is unrealistic and also unattainable. No one speaks perfectly. It's good to know that we all speak messy, and this is going to put the students at ease quite a lot. And finally, listen to a stretch of podcasts and just get the students to identify the features. When back channeling happens, get them to make a note or notice it. When self-repair, repairing strategies kick in, get them to notice it. See what people do. Get the students to analyze these sort of their sort of pragmatic features. And at this moment, I do want to recommend, it's not strictly a podcast, but I really can't recommend enough the BBC's Listening Project, the Listening Project. It's basically two people who are, sometimes three, but usually two people talking about something specific. They're usually very short, between 3 and 10 minutes, and it's as natural as you can get, really. Because people are just talking naturally, and you get a variety of accents and a variety of topics. That's a great resource for this sort of thing. Finally, it's great to encourage students to get into podcasts in their own time, of course. Sometimes quantity is the main thing. Just listening and listening and listening and getting into something. So I'm going to leave you now with 3 podcasts that cover a range of topics and can sometimes be funny and sometimes serious and sometimes academic and sometimes just curious. And they're quite varied, and they are aimed at English learners. And they're always engaging, these ones. So first of all is Luke's English podcast. This guy has been on the scene forever. He's one of the longest running English ESL podcasters, and he's great. Some episodes are really like lessons. Some episodes are basically just a ramble. He's just talking. But there's always something interesting somewhere for everybody. Also, Kangaroo English. These topics can be a bit heavy, and he speaks a lot about learning strategies. He doesn't really teach grammar or anything like that. These are kind of pep talks, but they're very inspiring, and they really help. They're designed to help students feel more comfortable and more confident with their learning, their English learning. And they're very good. These episodes are great at getting rid of misconceptions that students have. Things like they need to speak like a native speaker. Things like they need to read Dickens in order to be able to read properly. No, you should read whatever you like, whatever engages you. Great pep talks from Kangaroo English. And finally, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to put my own one up because I've been running a podcast for a couple of years. The Clark and Miller English podcast. And we cover quite a range of things. Sometimes they're like just straight up lessons. I've got the first one is called Say versus Tell. But some of them are interviews with teachers, students, and just people who are curious about language. Some of it even goes into straight up linguistics. So I've huge range of topics, something for all of our students somewhere in these 3 podcasts. Why podcasts? Good question. So, first of all, podcasts offer a range of different topics, and they get very topic specific. Some podcasts are about fishing. Some podcasts are about space exploration. Some podcasts just focus on peanuts. And with every single topic, we get different unique lexis, different sort of vocabulary. So it's a great way to pick up specific vocabulary in a nice sort of categorized and contextualized way. Why podcasts instead of normal listening exercises? Well, listening exercises, traditional listening exercises are kind of often very scripted, a little bit stilted. Some of them are really good, but you can always tell with these exercises that they're aiming for something specific. They're trying to get the students to focus on a piece of grammar or a sort of communicative feature, or they're always focusing on something particular. And students always know when they're being kind of manipulated into focusing on something. Podcasts, on the other hand, they're more natural, less stilted, and they don't have this sort of agenda. So students can sort of get into them on their own terms. Also, podcasts are very cool and very popular. Everyone loves podcasts, and no one really likes listening exercises. Not when they're given a choice between the two. Finally, podcasts are very portable. I mean, we have apps, we have phones, we all walk around with headphones on all the time. They're accessible anywhere, anytime, pretty much. So yeah, range of lexis is very high, and very specific and contained also. More natural, more free-flowing, puts the students at ease, very cool and popular, and portable. So these are the 4 reasons why podcasts can be superior to traditional listening exercises. So what are you going to walk away with from this masterclass? Well, first of all, you're going to walk away with 6 lesson plans, or classroom exercises, or classroom procedures, or whatever you want to call them, things you can do in your lesson, basically. 6 different, let's call them exercises, for both specific podcasts and ESL podcasts more generally. So we're going to look at 3 specific ESL podcasts and exercises you can do with those very podcasts, and also some exercises you can do with ESL podcasts in general. We're also going to look at 2 awareness-raising exercises for real-world, messy, non-ESL podcast listening. So we're going to look at ways we can prepare our students for more advanced listening and more messy listening. We're going to look at things like negotiation strategies, like back channeling and accent variety. We're going to look at chunking and things like that. Things that we can get the students to improve their skills in real world listening, basically. And finally, in all of this put together, there are 11 podcast recommendations and 1 YouTube recommendations. So you're going to have a good list of different resources that you can take and look at and lesson plan with, and maybe also enjoy yourself, because I enjoy a lot of these ones myself, and I'm not even really technically an English learner. So yeah, these are the things you'll be walking away with. We got, I'll recap, 6 lesson plans, 2 awareness-raising activities, and 11 recommendations plus a YouTube recommendation. So hopefully this will be more than enough ammunition to take into your classroom and get your students addicted to listening in English.